Welcome to MenopauseWize, your go-to podcast for all things evidence-based in the MenopauseVerse. I am Dr. Supreet Patel, an MD gynecologist, a menopause health advocate, a postmenopausal woman, and the founder of MenopauseWize. And I'm so excited to have you join us on this journey. Whether you're a healthcare provider looking to stay on top of the latest evidence-based practices, a woman navigating your own perimenopause or menopause journey, or a partner or family member eager to support a loved one, this series is designed with you in mind. Our mission through MenopauseWize is to close the menopause knowledge gap by bringing you the latest research, expert insights, and practical advice, empowering you to make informed decisions about menopause and perimenopause. Welcome to today's episode of the MenopauseWize podcast on lifting weights and menopause with Dr. Stuart Phillips. Dr. Phillips is a distinguished university professor in the Department of Kinesiology and a member of the School of Medicine at McMaster University. He is a Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in Skeletal Muscle Health. Dr. Phillips' work centers around the interaction of exercise, physical activity, aging, and nutrition in skeletal muscle and body composition. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Phillips, and very excited to have you here.
My
Uh,
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, there seems to be so much confusion about what kind of exercise women should engage in during midlife or menopause or
Yeah.
perimenopause, and just beyond the basic walk or run.
Mm.
So I'm really excited for you to share your insights and untangle some of this confusion for us today. So let's jump in with the very first basic question. What is skeletal muscle and why is it so important for us
Yeah.
women in midlife to focus on it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, muscle, I think everybody knows it's the organ of locomotion. Muscles pull on tendons, tendons pull on bones, and that's why we can pick things up, why we can move our legs, how we can get around. But I think there's an underappreciated role of muscle. I think most people wouldn't sort of guess that it's a really important storage site for blood glucose. So the more muscle you have and the more active it is, your risk, for example, for type 2 diabetes goes down. At the same time, once you get older, I think a lot of people are familiar with that older people lose their mobility, their ability to move around. And that's a big deal. Once they lose their mobility, they're dependent on other people, family members, maybe caregivers. And so it's a central tissue in terms of its importance to take care of as we age so that we can age successfully and as healthily as possible.
And how would one get started with looking after their muscle? We know it's an important organ to support all different aspects of our health, but
Yeah.
how does one get started? As most of us realize pretty late, women aren't very active with lifting weights, or at least
Mm.
my generation wasn't. I
Yeah.
see more of the younger girls at the gym, and it's so
Yeah.
nice to see them.
Yeah.
Um, but is it too late for a woman to start, and what should she get started with?
Yeah. So great questions. I think important part, and if you remember nothing else from what we've talked about today, is that it really is never too late to start. And that applies to, women in their 60s, 70s, and even their 80s and 90s. So we know that, age appropriate exercises for those folks have a wonder and a myriad of benefits in terms of particularly mobility, but health. I think most women, it's a lot the same message that you get around bone, right? You need to sort of build your peak bone mass up to around 30 because muscle sort of hits its peak at 30 and then it actually starts to go down for most people. But if you're in midlife and you're like, goodness me, what do I do? So the entry level most women would think about is I can go for a walk or I can go for a run or maybe ride a bike. And those are great activities. And I think, you and I were talking, I said, those are the activities that add years to your life, and they keep you out of the cardiologist's office and they're great. But as you get a bit older, I do think that the focus shifts a little bit. And now we talk about adding life to our years. And in that sense, then it's being stronger or actually being able to generate force powerfully, so moving quickly, and even the act of getting up and out of a chair is actually a power maneuver. In other words, your muscles have to generate force and generate it quickly. So you have to do something that adds load to your muscles. Now, everybody thinks go to the gym, lift weights. I don't like to do that. But it could be as simple as adding body weight workouts. And so, anything that supports your own body weight, which is ultimately what you have to lift, towards the end of our lives, is good strengthening type work. So it could be something relatively simple that you wouldn't require going to a gym, for example.
And what would that be? We hear a lot about things like the weighted vest these days. And
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about it? And what does research have to say about weighted vests for bone, for muscle, for weight loss? It just seems to be, oh, if I've just put on a vest and sit down during this chat, is it going to help me in any way?
Yeah. The weighted vest is. It sort of seems like it's an old thing, right? It's been around for years, and it seems to enjoy this. It just sort of resurges every now and again, and everybody has figured out that and it's true, right? I mean, if you can imagine, if you weigh, 100 pounds, and then you wear a vest that's 20 pounds, now you feel like you weigh 120 pounds, so you've got to move 120 pounds around, and it's hard. It's harder. Your heart rate's higher. You burn more energy, and lots of things like that. So I think that's sort of an interesting. They're usually not 20 pounds. They're usually at about 5 to 6% to your body weight. And so they do work then in that sense, but from the standpoint of the effect that it has, for most women, it's pretty small. It's like we call it a gentle nudge. And so it does make you a little bit stronger, but it would do, compared to actually physically lifting weights, it's a pretty small advance. And from a bone standpoint, there's lots of data to show that those weighted vests don't do anything. So, between useful and sort of not so useful, I sort of put them closer to the not so useful side of things.
hmm I I guess it just seems to be the simpler way out, right? It just feels easier if I put it on while having this chat
Yeah.
as opposed to having to go to the gym and lift weights for a fair amount of time. So yeah, so thanks for that. What about you mentioned power and strength, and I think that's something that I didn't realize for a long time, uh, the difference between the two. And
Yeah.
I would love to hear about what you have to say and why does it matter as we are aging to have power and not just strength?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's familiar with the concept of strength. So if you're trying to pick up something very heavy, you bend down to grab it and you sort of slowly pull it off the ground. The difference is with power, the emphasis is on grabbing a hold of something that's lighter and moving it fast. So
Mhm.
you know for a fact that you can lift it, but you do the maneuver with speed or velocity. And in that sense, then it's the difference between if you were to do an arm curl and sort of slowly move your arm up, as opposed to something that was relatively light and you could snap your arm up. So that's a powerful maneuver. And this is more of a strength maneuver. So there are some aspects of lifting, and getting up out of a chair is one of them, where your leg muscles actually need to move fairly quickly. They can't sort of generally lever you out of a chair. You've got to generate force, but you've got to do it quickly to lift yourself up out of a chair. So it's a lift that is done with speed. So generally necessitates having a lighter load to do it. It could be your own body weight, but it could be something as simple as a resistance band, for example. So these bands are things that you can hook on to pieces of furniture, or you can stand on them and you can squeeze them and do arm curls. And in that sense, then you can do them fairly quickly. You can pull them up rapidly, and then you're developing power. So your nervous system becomes used to essentially operating and activating those muscles quickly, and that's power versus strength, where it's something really hard to do. And, when you're lifting it, it's slow, right? And I know a lot of people get confused because they see power lifters who lift heavy things, and it's really not power. It's heavy lifters, is probably the better word, as opposed to power lifters.
I guess we don't pay attention to small things like having to get up from a chair while we are
Mm,
younger, and that what it needs for us to
yeah.
actually get ourselves up from a chair or put something overhead quickly, or
Yes.
and I think as we age, okay, so question is, um 50-year-old versus a 70-year-old.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk women here. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
we're just going to be
Sure.
biased about talking about women
Sure.
here.
Sure. Yeah.
And 50-year-old versus a 70-year-old.
Yeah.
Um, can I build power when I'm older? Is it safe for me to build power when I'm older? Because in my head, I'm thinking power needs is in motion.
Yes.
Is it safe to develop power later? Because our reflexes are kind of slow then.
Yeah.
Does it impact power versus strength?
Yeah, like great question. So, you and I spoke before the call, and that so two floors, excuse me, down from here, there are about 300, 400 community folks exercising, and their average age is 72. So we ground them in basic resistance exercise maneuvers, with safety being the primary consideration. But when we talk to men or we talk to women, it's the very same sort of safety briefing if they've never done weightlifting before. And clearly, a 50-year-old is going to be stronger in most cases than a 70-year-old. And at the same time, there's probably some issues health wise that we've got to think about. But it's very safe to do. It usually requires a little bit of supervision, but there are some amazing videos on YouTube that are a free resource that you could look up and watch people do this, and you don't have to pay or everything. So there, all you need is the internet connection. And the essence is to think about power, doing something. So if it were your own body weight and you were to move your arm, is it about moving your arm like this? Or is it about moving your arm like this? And imagine that there's an elastic band on there now. So there's a little bit of resistance, and that's the load we're talking about. And it shouldn't be an elastic band that you go and you're trying to force it. It should be an elastic band that is actually allows you to do something fairly quickly, but it's applying resistance and pulling your arm back. And in that sense, then you're developing power. And there are studies that go to as old as individuals who are even in their 90s. So, nonagenarians who are developing both strength and power. Clearly, it's done mostly around getting up and out of a chair. It's done some maneuvers that are very much focused on your own body weight. The maneuver that we get our old people to do to assess it is to put their arms across their chest, and so they can't push up on a chair, and say, can you get up and out of a chair? And it surprises a lot of them to know that they can't do it, because they usually, what they do is they put their arms and they're pushing up and out of the
Mm.
chair. And once we take those away, it's all leg work. And then, as you say, they're like, I can't do that. But the good news message is, in about 8 to 10 weeks of us just doing even some very, very simple stuff, and a little bit of strength and power training, all of a sudden they do this and they're up and out of the chair, they sit down and they can do it 5 times.
Wow.
And I like to say to them, I said, you've just gained in that you've separated these curves, and it could be as much as 4, 5, 6 years of independent living. So it
Wow.
happens quickly, and it works, and it actually doesn't matter when you start it.
That is wonderful. That is so encouraging to hear, especially when, I think a menopause sometimes is a wake-up call for a lot of us.
Yeah.
The realization that, oh my God, I'm losing bone density,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what's going to happen, especially for bone density. And like for me, strength training, resistance training, I kind of was always doing a bit of it, but I feel I
Yes.
started pushing it just because of my fear of osteoporosis. Now I
Yeah.
love it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it started off with fear. Um, but I think a lot of women would be highly encouraged now to know that they can build muscle at any age. That brings me to the other part of fears amongst women. Typically, I don't want to do any resistance training because I will bulk up. I'm really
Yeah.
trying to bulk up and it's not happening. But
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
is that something that you see? You've seen over the years with
Yeah.
women. How easy or difficult is it to bulk up?
Yeah, so I've been at McMaster now for almost 28 years, and we've run, I would say it's probably about 18, 19 resistance training studies where we've brought naive people in, sometimes trained people, and we get them to do something or another. Admittedly, not as many in women as in men, but we have done about 5 studies in women, both younger, and we just finished a really big study in older women as well. And I've heard the I don't want to bulk up several times. And all I'll say is in 28 years of doing this, I've yet to see a woman who bulks up. I think it's an interesting observation. Women who are probably in their 60s and 70s now, when you go back in time and you think, what were the role models in terms of the women that they looked at that they would think, oh, that's who I want to be. And it was all very aerobic focused for women. It was Jane Fonda's
Mm,
aerobic workouts and these women who were very slim, but they certainly weren't strong. So whereas, if you had a male role model, there were plenty of guys who were lifting weights. And so I think women have this impression that they'll begin to look like a man. And
mm,
it's not true. So to bulk up, you need to eat a ton of food. You need a lot of food. You probably might take some exogenous help in the form of anabolic steroids. And men do get broader chests, their shoulders get wider, which I'm not sure any woman is particularly looking forward to. But from the same standpoint, women's musculature is smaller. They tend to grow muscles much slower, but they do grow muscle. But it doesn't. It just doesn't lay on the same in terms of a woman as it does with a man. So, yeah, and I've coached some pretty good female athletes, and some are muscular because that's their sport. But it's a very specific regime of training that they undergo. So, yet to see the woman who truly bulks up. It's really, yeah, it's not a fear that should stop any woman from lifting weights or from doing something to make herself stronger, for sure.
yeah. What about injuries? I think a lot of women fear injury. Okay, I'll go to the gym and then I will get injured. So,
Yeah.
um, eh, is progressive overload something that would help the injury, or could you explain how one can prevent getting injured for a novice, first
Yes.
time? Yeah.
So you mentioned a concept there that is sort of core to what we do when we train people, and this is progressive overload. So you start with a small weight, and it's something you can lift if you're doing a curl or pushing it over your head. You can do it maybe 10 times. And then it gets easy. You could easily do it 15 or something like that. And so that's the signal that your muscle has adapted. So we need to make the weight heavier. So if it was 5 pounds, we move up to 7.5 pounds, for example. And then after a while, you can do 7.5, and then we move you up to 10. But at some point, you realize is that 10 that's probably about all you're ever going to be able to push over your head. That's fine. At this point, it becomes a situation where, if you try to move up, like if you really wanted to try and push yourself, you might say, well, I'll do fewer repetitions, but I'll keep the weight. So I'll go to 12.5, but I'll only do it 5 times. That's fine, but just realize is that if you keep increasing the weight, the conditions for maybe sustaining an injury do get higher as well. So we like to get people to realize that there's a limit to where everybody sort of is comfortable going. And most of the injuries, if people do develop them, are hopefully nothing traumatic, because we don't really do that style of lifting in our facility. But it's really, it's one of either two things. Usually people try to lift something that's too heavy beyond their usual capability, or they start doing too much lifting. And so they lift one day a week and they find they're getting stronger, and they say, okay, well, I'll try adding a second day. And it doesn't seem like a big thing, but if you've only done one day to go to 2 days, that's doubling the amount of work that you've done. So you just have to it's always slow progress is better. Realize is that heavier weights are not always going to benefit you. And if you're going from 1 day to 2 day, or from 2 days to 3 days or something like that, then do it slowly. And maybe on the second day, don't try and do exactly what you did on the first day. So maybe do upper body on the first day and then work your legs on the second day. These are ways of sort of manipulating how you can train to minimize, I would say, your risk for injury. But my mantra these days, and I lift weights at least 2 days a week, is, some people say no pain, no gain. I'm like, no pain, no pain. That's great. That's a successful training session, because then I get to come back and do it again, which is what I want to do. So I never push myself to the point where I like the last time I'm fighting it or something so hard that I think if I do this, there could be an injury that happens. And that's generally when you get really close to fatigue, you're lifting something really heavy, or you're just doing too much.
So that brings me to heavy. What is heavy? What should let's say I'm now I was doing 10 reps
Yeah.
with 5 pounds, and now it's become boring. I can do 15 now. So you go
Yeah.
higher and higher. But what's a
Right.
great, there's so much about reps in reserve and RPEs and all these acronyms that I
Yeah.
forget what they mean. But but the point
Right.
is, what should I be focusing on? Should I be doing 3 to 6 reps of so-called heavy loads? Should I be
Yeah.
doing 10 to 12 reps of a medium load?
Yes.
What's going to stimulate? Okay, I'm going to look at the menopausal woman again. So
Yep.
focus would be bone health to begin
Yep.
with.
Yep.
Um, how do I protect my bone in terms of reps? What's the best
Right.
case scenario?
So let's start out at the muscle end first, because that's what I know, and then we'll build up and answer the bone question. So, what is heavy, right? So we have a concept in weightlifting known as the single or one repetition max, and that's the weight that you can only do once. So, men all the time, it's how much can you bench, right? You're laying there, and how much can you push off of your chest?
Mm,
Um, we try not to focus much on that lift, although it's a way of gauging how strong you are. And we focus a little bit more on how much could you lift something, say, 5 times. And so that's a pretty heavy load. If you can only do it 5 times, chances are you're not going to pick something up that you can only pick up 5 times too many times in a day. Because if you have to do it a sixth time, you couldn't.
mm,
So from that standpoint, I think it sort of gives everybody a level. It's sort of, there's something, whatever it is that I'm picking up off the floor, or I look down at it and I'm like, I don't know if I could do that. Or if there's something I could, push over my head, but it's a little too heavy and there's just no way I can do it. So that's exceeded your strength capacity. So we like to try and put people, have them lifting a weight where they're doing it at least 8 times, or maybe closer to 10 to 12 times. So on the 10th or the 8th or the 10th or the 12th time they lift it, they're sort of feeling, they're like, this is hard.
Mm,
It's not so hard that if we look, and we have scales when in our facility where you would say that's a 10 out of 10.
mm,
I cannot do anything anymore. That should be the 1 RM lift, is like, that's a 10. Like, I just can't do anymore. So we like people to finish in a range that is about an 8 out of 10.
mm,
So if we're doing it 8 times, on the eighth repetition, when we're lifting something up, we're like, no, that's about an 8. It's about 10 repetitions. We're in the same range. And so
mm,
those repetitions in reserve that you spoke about are like, I could maybe do this 1 or 2 more times, and that's it. So, I
mm,
mean, hopefully that benchmarks for everybody the types of loads we're talking about. And those are the loads that make you stronger. They allow your muscles to grow, not a lot, but
mm,
they do create muscle growth, what we call muscle hypertrophy. Um, Bone is a tissue that's a little bit different. It has what we call a mechanically sensitive component. In other words, if you load it, so you do the types of loads that we were talking about just now. It responds very favorably to that. It likes to, that's a stimulus for it to lay down bone mineral.
mhm,
But it also likes impact. In other words, it's a tissue that likes a jump. So if
mm.
you were to jump off the floor and then hit the floor fairly hard, for reasons that we won't go into them today,
Yeah.
but bone really enjoys that and says, okay, I need to form more bone because I'm getting this impact stimulus. So small jumps even are really good for bone. But the types of loads that I just described are, really impactful for bone. But you can scale it up and even go lift something 15 times, and a loading stimulus is what bones respond to. But
Mm,
there is some evidence to show that small jumping and impact, skipping, if so little jumps, and you don't need to do too many of them. Probably only about 15 to 20, and your bone is like completely turned on and ready to make new bone.
wow. So you said small jumps. So
Yeah.
even just the simple jump rope is good.
Yep. Yep, you don't need,
Um,
and it's not like you need to sit there and skip and do it for a long time.
yeah.
Something where you're doing it just, rapidly and sort of bouncing on the floor like that is actually a pretty good stimulus for hanging on to bone mass.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. It's so one doesn't need to. I think the important thing is that I want to ask here is one doesn't have to jump those high jump boxes for
No,
no.
no.
Okay.
No,
Because
there's probably, it's again like everything, right? Once you can do the small jumps, then maybe do a bigger jump, but it
yeah.
certainly doesn't need to be these big boxes. And yeah, no, that yeah, doesn't need to
That
happen.
is such a relief because I started with those jump boxes and I got the little one, the medium one, and I've been staring at the biggest one at the gym
Yeah,
every day.
yeah,
It's been a 6 month project for me to get to the medium one, and every day
yeah.
I look at the big red one and I'm like, do I want to? Do I want to? And I don't want to now. So I'm going to stick.
The number of times I've been in gyms, and it's sort of like, so you generally goes, there's a 6 inch box,
Yeah.
there's a 9 inch, and then there's a 12, and then there is always this higher one. And I see people do 6, 9, 12, and I think you're in good shape.
Yeah.
And then I watch somebody try to do the bigger one, and I almost, because I know something bad's going to happen. So I'm right there with you, Supreet. I don't recommend that at all. Too
So okay,
much
small.
risk for injury.
I know, and I think one has to weigh their risks and benefits, right? Like, I used
Yeah,
to run half marathons
yeah.
for a while, and then I started to question what was my purpose
Hmm.
now for this exercise. I was getting injured.
Yeah,
It was time consuming because to
yeah,
train for a 21, you've got to then, every weekend and every week, the mileage.
yeah.
And then you don't want it to be a poor timing because then it just looks bad. So So the question is, I think very often we're not questioning, why am I going to the gym today? What am I going to achieve out of this?
Yeah,
Um, so it's good to know that we can jump low and we can just use a jump rope,
yep,
and that also has impact. And if you don't
absolutely.
have a rope, you can jump without the rope. And,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
no, you don't need a rope. Just, and some people, lots of people find ways of creatively working this into their daily routine. And, I spoke on Instagram. I created a reel talking about a meta-analysis in which they had found one trial which was very effective at preventing fractures in women. And it was a trial from a Finnish group in which these women went to group exercise dance classes and did a lot of sort of stamping and little jumps in these dance classes where you think, well, so I can't imagine what it looked like, but you can imagine probably music involved, definitely a group activity, and these
Mm.
women doing these like relatively small jumping, stamping, sort of, I guess, kind of having a good time type maneuvers. So no weights, nothing. And it reduced the fracture risk in women that performed that. So it goes to show you just how small the stimulus can be for a pretty good benefit.
Sounds like a group of happy women, huh?
Yeah, it did. When I was reading it, I was thinking, this sounds like fun. It, definitely could be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, this could be like a good program to have osteoporosis prevention.
Hmm.
Or yeah, yeah. So now coming to you mentioned building muscle at any age.
Yeah.
Again, social media projects at menopause somehow reduces our ability to build muscle. What do you think about that, and what does data say about it?
Yeah, this is tough and contentious, I'll be honest. I think what happens is like a lot of things around the menopause is so, between the ages of 45 to 55, that's where, 95% of women lose their menstrual cycle. But it's not like it's, here today, gone tomorrow. But most of the preclinical models for this, so coming from rats and mice, are surgical ovarectomy where there is an on off switch. And in those models, there's an abrupt decline in strength. And so people use the preclinical data to go, look, this is what's happening in women. And I'm like, but it's not. It's a different model. Women, ovaries sort of begin to shoot and fire and spurt, and the estrogen cycle sort of it turns on, and it takes a long time to dissipate. Some women shorter than others, I admit, but the point is it's not an on-off switch. When we look at it that way, there is no actual convincing evidence in humans, in females, that the slow decline in estrogen is responsible for a strength loss or a muscle loss per se. So I think that it's important to realize that it happens over a period of years, and the change in strength is actually more related to aging than it is to a change in the estrogen hormone itself. And we know for a fact that in hormone replacement therapy, women symptom wise, great. It's a great stimulus for hanging on to bone as well. But it doesn't improve muscle and it doesn't make women stronger. So it's sort of evidence that the absence of estrogen and adding it back doesn't have the strength benefits. So it's really an age issue more than
Mm.
anything. And pushing back against it, the only thing that we really have is resistive exercise, loading exercise, weightlifting.
Mm. I think adding back hormones, maybe there's no evidence that it can support yeah, get help women get stronger, but at the same time I feel women who are on hormone therapy, they probably would have a better, uh, and this is, of course, needs to be studied, but
Yeah.
I guess there would be some introduction of bias because a woman who's sleeping better with hormone therapies probably has a higher
Yep.
chance of hitting the gym the next
Yeah.
morning than
Yeah.
someone who's just frustrated with her poor sleep. So But also there is the looking at it from the other side is women on hormone therapy sometimes can take things for granted. You know, it's like wearing a helmet. You think you can ride the bicycle
Mhm.
recklessly, is also then you're less motivated to go to the gym because you think, oh, the hormones are kind of protecting my bones, so could
Yeah,
work either way.
and it's an interesting concept. Lots of women have told me about the symptom relief that they get when they take hormone therapy, and clearly, if it reduces the number of hot flashes, night sweats, and the ability to sleep better improves, I would think that a lot of aspects of your life get better. Brain fog goes, lots of things where then you're able to think, okay, today. I'm going to do this. I had 7 hours of sleep as opposed to three. And so my motivation is higher. My ability to be able to handle a lot of the things and deal with my day to day life that before was just like I couldn't even think about doing all the things that the hormone therapy. So as a secondary consequence, I agree, and I think that would be fascinating to study. As far as I know, we don't know whether that's true,
Mm,
but you're not the first woman to say that to me.
of
I'm
course.
thinking, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Even the sleep thing, if it can improve sleep, which I think is sort of the origin of lots of good behaviors, then you're probably in better shape.
Yeah. But now coming to time,
Mm.
very often we hear women saying, because we're looking at 45, 55-year-olds who are busy with work,
Yeah,
children, parents,
yeah,
how does one optimize their exercise? Like if I have 20 minutes in the day, is it useless
yeah.
doing any kind of weight bearing? And if I can use it, what's the best productive way to use it?
Right. Um, the message is very clear on this is that everything counts and you don't need a go to the gym, sweat till you drop workout to see benefit. Now, the benefits happen a little slower with small workouts, but it's the constant practice of those things that has the benefit. They can be 20 minutes long. They can be as short as 10 minutes long. Even we talk about exercise snacks during the day for people who, are very time crunched. So the types of folks that you're talking about. I have a colleague that talks about high intensity interval training, but if you don't have to get on a bike, you just go and find, 4 or 5 flights of stairs and go up the stairs, descend slowly, go up the stairs again, and try that a few times, and you're breathless.
Mm,
Um, I talk about body weight squats, so getting up and then simply standing up, and then coming down in the squatting position and doing that, 3 times a day. And people say, oh, it's ridiculous, and I'm like, it takes 10, 15 seconds, and do it three
mm,
times a day, or do it all together if you want, once times 3 times. And I said, once you begin to do it, and people they go, what are you doing? You go, oh, I'm just taking an exercise snack. And these types of things, I've been impressed at how potent an effect they can have.
mm.
So you don't need to change your clothes. You don't need to go to the gym. Uh, you hopefully won't break into a big sweat, although, different
In Mumbai, in,
environments.
in Mumbai, you may, but
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I have visited Mumbai, and the main I'm thinking there, I'm like, you might get a bit sweaty in Mumbai, that's for sure, but not so sweaty that you would need a shower afterwards,
true,
hopefully.
true.
But it's a good point. But I mean, the point is, my colleague, like 3 doors down, Dr. Martin Gabala, wrote a book on high intensity interval training. And I used to think, like, if I didn't have half an hour to, kind of smash it on the bike, I was wasting my time. But now he's got me
Mm,
into the mindset where even, a small, short walk outside with a little bit of like a stair climb, if I can find one, or these sort of accelerated periods are a lot, and I mean a lot better than nothing.
mm,
It doesn't. I think we subscribe to this. If I'm not sweating in a pool and I'm on the floor and I'm thinking, it's some sort of near death experience, that it's not worth it. And that's just not the case.
Mm. I love the concept of exercise snacking, especially
Yeah.
because most of us don't have that chunk of time
Yeah.
um, to dedicate to the gym. And I think this is really powerful. The fact that we can do these little bits and they're not useless to not,
Hmm.
especially with our desk jobs these days, and we're spending
Yeah.
so much time.
Yep.
So this is great. What about clinicians? And I'm going to bring them up because I've been one of through my entire career.
Yeah.
But I think I'm in some way embarrassed when I look back at how little I knew about muscle health
Yeah.
during med school years while practicing. And that percolates into my patient care, right? Because if I am not educated, I am not using it myself optimally, how can I advise a patient on it?
Right.
And it is such a critical part of uh, offering complete care to a patient
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
So, your advice for clinicians um, when they are speaking to women in midlife?
Yeah. I think there's a greater emphasis on women's health, which I think is, very well deserved. You and I spoke. My wife is a cardiovascular physiologist. I'd also mention she's my boss's boss as well, so she's a pretty big deal around here. And she's a very strong and passionate advocate for women being physically active as a means of taking control of a part of their life where things often seem very out of control. I think we're learning. Hopefully, the learning curve for clinicians is beginning to go up with respect to what physical activity and then as a result, what muscle means for metabolic health. I think the main barrier is to try and find a branch or a group of medicine that has muscle as a focus. And it's not really the folks who are interested in physical medicine, rehabilitation, maybe sports medicine, maybe. But as a part of, say, neurology, it's usually people focused on the brain. And I'm like, well, the brain talks to the muscles, right? So I have a good friend who's a neurologist, but he deals with everything from the brain on out. But I think that the appreciation of muscle is growing, and hopefully the awareness of what it means to maintain that tissue as a vital organ, particularly in midlife. It's an investment in the future you. It's like
Mm,
compound interest, and so if the vision of your future self is to be physically active, to be able to play with your grandchildren or whatever it is, to travel, to move around, then it has to be focused on muscle for sure.
yeah, wonderful. And one can start at any age, and
At
that's
any
that's
age, yeah,
that is
for
so
sure.
encouraging. Yeah,
Yeah.
start wherever you are. Start with whatever little that you can, and we can always work our way upward. So that is encouraging. Um, three non-negotiables. Three non-negotiables for a woman in midlife to maintain her, let's not even say muscle mass, to look at her independent future self. What should she be doing?
Yeah. Something to think about, making yourself stronger, or if not making yourself stronger, definitely preventing the decline in strength. It doesn't have to be hard gym type work. It can be body weight work, but it's going to be important. For most women, at least in North America, they outlive their male partners by on average 5 years. And
Mm.
80% of them spend that 5 years in institutionalized care. So you might want to think about that. So the future you is going to have to take care of yourself. And I think that strength training is a big part of doing that.
Mm. What about exercises which you didn't cover? Is, things like Pilates, yoga is very popular in
Yeah.
India, and
Yeah.
I very often hear women say, "Hey, but I do yoga 5 times
Yeah.
a week. Do I need to go to the gym, or do I need to do any kind of resistance training?" What do you
Yeah.
have to say about that?
So yoga and Pilates, and appreciating that there's lots of different types of yoga,
Hmm.
and dependent on your instructor, some are very and I do some yoga, not a lot, but
Hmm.
enough. And the poses, lots of them challenge me in lots of ways. And so it's a great activity for development and maintenance of balance, which is very important as you get older to reduce your fall risk. And it can make you stronger, but just realize that the top end of your strength in all of those types of activities is the weight of your own body, which is fine. But if you want to go more than that, then you would need to apply an external resistance. And so, uh, challenging, great activity. I think it's fantastic. If it's what you like to do, definitely keep doing it. The strength part is, just remember it's going to sort of go up to about here, and there's more strength that you could gain if you lifted a weight or did something with some external resistance.
So basically, you'd plateau off at a point which would perhaps be lower than what it could be if you were lifting weights.
Yeah,
Right.
but again, to come back to the message of, it's doing something that's
Yeah.
most important as opposed to doing nothing. If you say yoga, Pilates, and I'm doing them 3-4 times a week, first of all, there's a very, I think, mental aspect to those activities that's very calming, very peaceful. Lots of people find they're very relaxed afterwards, and who's not, I would never argue with that as an outcome. And you will be stronger, you will be more flexible, and your balance will be better. I mean, so checking a lot of boxes. If you go
Mm,
for a walk, even better. If you lifted a bit of weights, even better. So that's where I
yeah.
come in.
Okay. So basically, do something
Do
and
something.
do it consistently.
Exactly.
Right. And that's what I find, implementation failure at that level, because discipline is boring.
It is.
It's required, but it is boring. Oh, I'm too bored of this, and I'm too bored
Yeah.
of that, and
Yeah.
mm, so that's the
Yeah.
important thing is showing up, and yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So that's good to know. Um, about our we could get into other aspects of muscle, because it's obviously not just dependent on the exercise, but nutrition and other things as well. But
Yeah.
we that's I think we can go on for another maybe a few episodes to discuss those. But
Sure.
regarding just exercise and lifting weights for our women in midlife or through menopause, what's your takeaway message for us?
If you're not doing it, you should start. I think it's incredibly important. I think I said it before, but going for a walk and riding a bike, that's years to your life. It's the life to your years that strength training will add. That I think women are often surprised at how strong they can get. And I think there's an aspect of being stronger
Mm,
that women find particularly empowering. Um, I don't know what it is. It's not the type of work I do, because I would need to interact with probably a psychologist or sociologist to understand what it is. But it's an empowering activity for women, particularly when they work in groups, to get strong together.
mm,
There's just a little bit of I feel pretty good about myself, and so I
mm.
think it's a key and critical activity for women in midlife, and particularly around perimenopause, for sure.
Uh, so that's what we're going to go away with today. That we are just going to do something, starting wherever we are and moving our way upwards. Um,
Perfect.
yes. Okay. So thank you so much for this. It's been very insightful and
My
so much to
pleasure.
learn.
Thanks again for tuning in to MenopauseWize. Stay informed, stay empowered, and I'll see you in the next episode as we continue to navigate the menopause journey together. If you're a healthcare provider interested in collaborating with us or have insights to share, we'd love to hear from you. Please email us at info@menopausewize.com. That's wise with a Z. And before we go, a quick medical disclaimer. The information provided in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your physician or a qualified healthcare provider before making any decisions regarding your health or any medical treatments discussed in this podcast. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, this podcast does not replace professional medical consultation, diagnosis, or treatment. If you have any concerns or symptoms that require medical attention, please seek advice from your healthcare provider.